Okay, I want you to picture a scenario for a second. You're out somewhere, maybe a bar, maybe a coffee shop, or you're just, swiping on an app, and you meet two people. Let's call them person A and person B. Now, person A is stable. They text you back in a normal amount of time.
The dream.
Right, the supposed dream. They ask how your day was, and they actually listen to the answer. They're consistent. They're nice.
And then, of course, there's person B.
Oh yeah, person B. Person B is a little bit mysterious. Maybe they take, I don't know, 6, 7 hours to text you back, and when they do, it's just some vague emoji.
You have no idea what it means.
None. You never quite know where you stand with them. It feels like a gamble. Every single time you interact, it's all high stakes, high drama. Now, logic, your brain, says you pick person A. Person A is the quote unquote safe bet. But be honest with yourself. Who is your gut pulling you toward?
And for a huge number of people, that gut feeling is just screaming for person B. And then they get home at the end of the day and they just beat themselves up about it. They're asking, why do I always do this? Why is the nice guy, the stable person, so boring to me? Why does a healthy relationship feel, frankly, a little repulsive?
Exactly. It's this incredibly frustrating paradox, isn't it? We say we want love, we say we want safety, we say we want a partner who respects us, but the very moment we get it, something inside just recoils.
It's almost like an allergic reaction to peace.
It is. And then on the flip side, when things are chaotic, when they're messy and uncertain, we feel this magnetic pull. We feel, alive.
It's that age-old question, right? Why do I keep dating the same person with a different face? And the answers we usually give ourselves are, well, they're pretty superficial. We think, oh, I just have a type, or I guess I'm just unlucky, or, the classic, I just haven't found the right one yet. But if you actually dig into the mechanisms of the mind and really the nervous system, it's rarely about luck. It's about architecture.
Architecture. That makes it sound like a building project.
In a way, it is. It's the architecture of your survival instincts. It's the invisible blueprint that was drawn up for you before you even really knew what a relationship was.
And that is exactly what we are tearing apart today. We're calling this deep dive the invisible blueprint. We're going to look at how our childhood experiences, specifically things like emotional neglect or trauma, end up dictating who we date, how we argue, and even how we physically experience intimacy as adults.
And we are pulling from a really fascinating stack of sources to do this. I'll admit, it's kind of a heavy stack.
It is. It's definitely heavy, but I think it's going to be incredibly validating for a lot of people listening.
I think so, too. We're looking at some key clinical insights from psychology today, specifically the work of a therapist named Katie Gillis, who works with domestic violence survivors, and also Dr. Annie Tanasugern, who's done this incredible analysis of common patterns of unresolved trauma.
Right. So those are the experts. They're kind of mapping the psychological territory for us.
They are. But we're not just looking at the maps. We wanted to hear from the people who are actually walking the terrain.
Yeah, this part was crucial for me. We're balancing that clinical data with something much more raw. We found this massive collection of first-person accounts from a community of emotional neglect survivors on Reddit. And I have to say, reading through those threads, it completely changes how you see the clinical terms.
It does. It stops being a disorder or a pattern, and it starts looking like a perfectly rational response to a completely irrational world.
Exactly. So before we get into the weeds of those Reddit stories, we need to anchor this whole conversation in a concept. You mentioned it already, from Katie Gillis.
Yes. She talks about something called repetition compulsion.
Which sounds like a very fancy scientific way of saying making the same mistake over and over again.
It's a little deeper than just a mistake. It's a drive. It's a compulsion. Gillis introduces us to this case study, a woman she calls Victoria. And Victoria's story is, I think, the perfect entry point for all of this. So Victoria had just managed to leave a very abusive relationship. She was physically safe. The immediate threat was gone. But she's sitting on Gillis's couch, and she confesses something that just confused her to her core. She wanted to go back.
And my first thought, like most people's, would be, oh, she still loves him. Or maybe she thinks he's going to change. The typical reason.
Right. That's the Hollywood narrative we're all fed.
Yeah.
But Victoria was really clear about it. She didn't think he had changed. She didn't even necessarily like him in that moment. She told Gilly she wanted to go back because of the chaos. It just felt familiar.
Wow. That's the word that just jumped out at me from the page. Familiar. So she was choosing a recognizable pain over a foreign kind of safety.
Precisely. And this is where we have to fundamentally challenge our definition of the word home.
Mm-hmm.
We grew up thinking home means a place of safety, of rest, of comfort. But Gillis explains that childhood abuse or neglect, it creates a template for what relationships are supposed to feel like. So if you're normal growing up involved yelling or manipulation or constantly walking on eggshells or even just a cold emotional distance, your brain categorizes that whole environment as home. That level of stress becomes your baseline.
So you fast forward 20 years, you meet someone who treats you with kindness, with respect, they're calm, they're consistent, and your nervous system doesn't go, ah, finally, relief.
No,
It goes, warning, unidentified object. What is this? I don't recognize this pattern.
it's not just that it doesn't recognize it. In many ways, it actually views it as a threat. And this brings us right to the first major pillar of our deep dive today. It's a pattern Dr. Annie Tanishigran calls being conditioned to chaos.
Conditioned to chaos. I mean, it sounds like the title of a psychological thriller, but let's really break down the mechanics of this, because I think a lot of us assume this is an emotional choice. I like bad boys because I like excitement, but you're saying it's not a choice, it's biology.
It is entirely physiological. Think about it this way. If you grow up in a really unpredictable environment, your nervous system has to adapt to survive.
Right.
You are constantly in a state of high arousal. It's called hypervigilance.
Yeah.
You're always scanning for threats. Your cortisol levels are up. Your adrenaline is pumping. You are ready to fight or flee at a moment's notice.
So you're basically running a marathon just sitting on the couch watching TV.
That's a great way to put it. Now, take that nervous system, a system that is perfectly tuned for a war zone, and you put it into a calm, quiet, safe relationship. What do you think happens?
It freaks out, it has no idea what to do.
It panics. Because to a hypervigilant brain, silence isn't peace. Silence is the moment right before the ambush.
Oh, that makes so much sense. In childhood, if the house suddenly got quiet, it might have meant that, the parents were plotting something or the anger was building up to some kind of explosion.
Exactly. So as an adult, when your partner is just being quiet, or things are stable and predictable for a while, your brain starts screaming, danger, incoming. This is the calm before the storm.
And this is what Tanishigran calls the other shoe syndrome.
Yes. The constant agonizing, waiting for the other shoe to drop. You literally cannot enjoy the good moment because you are already pre-living the bad moment that you are absolutely convinced is coming.
And this creates it's a really messed up dynamic because if you're sitting there just vibrating with anxiety in a quiet room, eventually you just want to stop the waiting. You want the shoe to drop just so you can stop anticipating it.
Which leads to one of the most tragic and I think misunderstood behaviors in trauma survivors.
Yeah.
Manufactured drama.
Okay, this is the part that's going to sting for some people listening. I have to admit, I felt a little called out just reading about it. Are you saying that we subconsciously create problems just to feel normal?
We do. If the external environment is too calm and your internal baseline is set to chaos, that discrepancy is deeply uncomfortable. It's like cognitive dissonance, but it's somatic. It's in your body.
So what does that look like in practice?
Well, you might subconsciously pick a fight over something tiny. You might start testing your partner's loyalty in little ways. Tana Sugart even mentions things like smearing a friend or a partner to other people just to get a reaction, to trigger a response.
You're just poking the bear.
You are poking the bear. Because a roaring bear is terrifying, but at least you know what to do with a roaring bear. You run, you fight, you have a plan. You don't know what to do with a sleeping one. That's the real terror.
There was an analogy I read years ago that I think fits perfectly here. It's the thermostat analogy.
Oh, I love that analogy. Go on, walk us through it.
Okay, so imagine your internal thermostat is set to chaos. Let's just call it, 75 degrees. That's the temperature of stress, of yelling, of uncertainty. That's your normal.
Your baseline.
Exactly. Now
Yeah.
you get into a healthy relationship. It's calm. It's cool. The temperature in the room drops to, say, a breezy 50 degrees.
Which should feel nice. It should feel like relief.
It should.
Yeah.
But your whole system is calibrated to 75, so when it hits 50, your internal furnace kicks on. You get alarms going off, warning, temperature too low, system failure imminent.
Right.
So you start an argument, you create a crisis, you stay out all night without calling, you are blasting the heat until the temperature in that relationship gets back up to that sweaty, uncomfortable, stressful 75 degrees. And then, and this is the wildest part, you relax.
That is a perfect visualization. You are regulating your external environment to match your internal state.
Mm.
And the tragedy is, until you realize you're the one doing it, you'll just keep thinking you're dating the wrong people.
Yeah, you'll think, man, all my relationships end in fights.
But you don't see that you were the one holding the match.
It's a survival mechanism that has just completely outlived its usefulness. In childhood, that hypervigilance, that thermostat setting, it probably kept you safe. But in adulthood, it's the very thing that keeps you lonely.
Correct. But the chaos isn't just about the external environment. It's also about how you process information. Tana Sugar goes really deep into how trauma rewires the way we actually think about people. This isn't just about feeling anxious, it's a cognitive distortion.
And you're talking about dichotomous thinking.
Dichotomous thinking, or as most of us would probably know it, all or nothing thinking.
Right. Black and white, good or bad, saint or sinner, no in between.
Exactly. And again, we have to look at the origin. Why would a child's brain develop this? Because in an unsafe home, you need to quickly categorize threats. Is mom in safe mode right now, or is she in scary mode? There is no time for nuance. Nuance gets you hurt. You need binary data to survive.
But real people and real relationships are incredibly nuanced. They live almost exclusively in that gray area.
Which is precisely why this blueprint just destroys adult relationships. If you're stuck in this dichotomous thinking, you view your partner through a binary lens. So when things are good, they brought you flowers, they listen to you vent about work, they are perfect. They are your savior. They can do no wrong. You put them up on this pedestal.
And then they forget to buy milk on the way home.
And then they forget the milk. Or they say something slightly insensitive without realizing it. And that switch just flips instantaneously.
Wow.
They go from savior to villain, from perfect to completely toxic. There is no middle ground where they are just a loving partner who is also a human being who is tired and forgot the dairy.
I can see how that would make any kind of conflict resolution basically impossible. Because you're not arguing about the milk anymore.
Never. You're arguing about their fundamental nature. A simple mistake becomes a massive character flaw. A minor disagreement becomes an act of betrayal. The thought process is something like, if you really loved me, you wouldn't have forgotten the milk. You forgot the milk, therefore you don't really love me, therefore I am unsafe. Therefore, this entire relationship is a lie.
That is a terrifyingly slippery slope to be living on, both for you and your partner.
It's exhausting for everyone involved. And it's driven by this other pattern that Tana Sugar identifies, which she calls the inner critic.
Ah, yes, the voice in the head.
The voice that trauma installs like a piece of malware. The inner critic's primary job is to enforce shame, to keep you in line, to keep you safe, but keeping you small. So when that conflict about the milk happens, the inner critic chimes in and says, see, I told you it wouldn't work. I told you they didn't really care. You're unlovable. They're going to leave you just like everyone else did.
Which leads directly into another one of Tana Sugar's patterns, doesn't it? Relational sabotage. It feels like the next logical step. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy.
It is the ultimate self-fulfilling prophecy. If your inner critic has convinced you that you are fundamentally unworthy, or that everyone you love eventually leaves, you might decide to take control of that inevitable ending. You blow up the relationship yourself.
You discard a healthy partner before they can discard you.
I'll fire myself before you can fire me. It's a preemptive strike to protect yourself from the searing pain of abandonment. If I leave you, I am in control. If you leave me, I am a victim again. So I will pick the fight, I will cheat, I will grow cold, I will do whatever it takes to drive you away so I can stand in the rubble and say, see, I knew it wouldn't last.
And strangely, and this is the cruelest part, this kind of sabotage often happens when things are going really well.
That is the most painful part. It happens when things are good, because that is when the vulnerability is highest. That is when the fear of the other shoe dropping is most intense. So you just drop the shoe yourself to get it over with.
Wow. Okay, before we move to the Reddit stories, which really bring this internal battle to life, there's one more pattern from Tana Sugar I want to hit because it feels so specific to our modern hustle culture world. And that's the constantly on the go pattern.
Ah, yes. The flight response, cleverly disguised as high performance.
I think a lot of people listening might see themselves in this one. We usually think of the flight response as, physically running away from danger. But you're saying it can look like a packed Google Calendar.
Absolutely. In trauma terms, flight is really about escaping the present moment. Because the present moment is emotionally painful or overwhelming. You can run away physically, sure, but you can also run away into work. You can run away into being busy. You can run away into perfectionism, into overachieving.
So the jam-packed schedule, the side hustles, the constant gym trips, the endless social obligations,
Mhm.
it's not just ambition, it's a wall.
It is a meticulously constructed barrier to intimacy. If you are constantly busy, you don't have time to feel. You're numb. And you certainly don't have time to let someone else in. Tana Sugar notes that at the root of this is often a deep sense of unworthiness, this gnawing need to prove you are good enough through constant achievement.
But the cost is connection.
The cost is always connection. You can't build a deep, meaningful relationship if you're never actually there, mentally or emotionally.
It's tragic, really. You're working so hard to become worthy of love that you make it literally impossible to ever receive it.
That's the paradox in a nutshell. You're building this beautiful, impressive castle to invite people in, but you're so busy building the walls that you forgot to install a door.
Okay. I want to shift gears here. We've laid out the clinical patterns, the addiction to chaos, the black and white thinking, the frantic busyness. But I really want to dive into what this feels like from the inside. We spent a lot of time going through this massive Reddit thread on emotional neglect. And I have to tell you, the level of self-awareness in that community is just staggering, but it's also absolutely heartbreaking.
These first-person accounts are just invaluable because they show us the real nuance of it all. You would think, logically, that someone who was neglected as a child would fantasize about a totally normal, happy relationship.
Yeah, you'd think they dream of like picnics and easy Sunday mornings.
Right, but that is not what we found in the source material at all.
No, it was much, much more complicated. There was one user who goes by Paper Doll, and she shared a reflection that has really stuck with me. I want to read a part of it because the wording is so incredibly specific and insightful. She was talking about her maladaptive daydreams. She said, I used to have fantasies about being a badass and saving the day, but I had to get hurdle most die suffer greatly first before I could be saved taken care of.
Suffer greatly first. That is a key phrase right there.
It is. She goes on to say, whatever scenario I made up, I had to work so hard and suffer so much to save the day, and only then would the characters take care of me. That cozy comfort of really earning the affection I wanted allowed me to finally trust it.
That is the earning it dynamic. It's a heartbreaking reflection of a core belief, which is that care cannot be given freely. It must be purchased. And the currency is struggle. The currency is pain.
But why? Why do we do that? Why does free, unconditional love feel like a scam?
Because for many neglected children, love was conditional, or it was entirely non-existent. If you grow up believing you are fundamentally a burden, or that your needs don't matter, the idea that someone would just hand you love for free, it doesn't compute. It feels like a trap.
It feels like they must want something from you.
Exactly. But if you suffer for it, if you bleed for it, well, then it feels earned. Then it feels like a transaction you can understand. The logic is, I paid my dues in pain, so now I am allowed to receive comfort.
It validates the suffering in a strange way.
And it protects you from the sheer vulnerability of just being loved for existing. Because if you have to earn it, you have some measure of control. If it's just given to you freely, you have no control at all, and that's terrifying.
This connects so directly to another theme that came up again and again in that thread, something people were calling the ick factor.
Yes, the ick. And we usually use that word for something superficial, like when a date wears bad shoes or chews with their mouth open. But here is being used to describe a visceral reaction to genuine affection.
One user wrote something that I think a lot of people feel but are way too ashamed to ever say out loud. They wrote, I find myself so unattractive that I find it off-putting when someone finds me attractive.
Let's just sit with that for a second. I find it off-putting when someone finds me attractive. This is such a classic projection of deep-seated shame. It brings to mind that old Groucho Marx quote, right? I wouldn't want to belong to any club that would have me as a member.
Right. If I'm garbage and you like me, then your taste must also be garbage.
Exactly. If your core belief, your operating system is, I am unlovable, then anyone who claims to love you presents a logical contradiction. Your brain has to resolve this paradox somehow. So it concludes, well, they must be broken, they must be desperate, or worse, they must be lying to manipulate me.
So instead of feeling flattered or happy, you feel disgust. You actually lose respect for them because they had the poor judgment to pick you.
It's a defense mechanism, a powerful one. It devalues the partner so you don't have to risk believing them. Because if you let yourself believe them, and you let that love in, and then they leave, it would confirm your deepest fear, that you really were unlovable all along. It is so much safer to reject them first for having bad taste.
The Reddit thread also had this recurring theme of the saving fantasy. So many users admitted to daydreaming vividly about being held, comforted, maybe by a fictional character or some vague protector figure. But the moment a real human being tries to offer that comfort, they cringe. They physically recoil and shut down.
Because it's safer in your head.
Yeah.
In your fantasy, you control the entire narrative.
Right.
You control the intensity of the affection. Most importantly, you control the rejection.
Yeah.
In reality, intimacy is dangerous because it involves another autonomous human being who has their own thoughts and feelings and can hurt you.
So they crave the idea of connection, but the reality of it triggers that flight response we were talking about.
Precisely.
This brings us to a really difficult but incredibly important part of this whole discussion, the physical and sexual toll of this blueprint. Because if you can't trust intimacy on an emotion level, it's almost impossible to engage with it physically.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I really want to give credit to the Reddit community for being so open and honest about this, because this is a topic that carries an immense amount of shame. There was a significant discussion about dissociation in the bedroom.
Can we define that in this specific context? What does sexual dissociation actually look and feel like?
It's the feeling of going through the motions. Your body is physically present, it's there, but your mind has checked out. It's gone somewhere else. You might feel numb. You might feel like you're floating on the ceiling, just watching the scene unfold below you. It's a classic freeze response. Your mind is escaping when your body can't.
One user, Mafna, describes something they called fictitious projection. I'd never heard this term before, but the description was so vivid. They said that during intimacy, they have to imagine they are someone else entirely. Or sometimes they imagine two other people are having sex. They cannot be themselves in the act of being loved or desired.
Because being self is unsafe.
Mm-hmm.
The logic is, if I am doing this, then I am vulnerable. But if I am pretending to be a character from a book, or if I'm just watching a movie in my head, then I am safe. It's a way to participate in the physical act without risking the core self.
And Tana Sugarin connects this feeling to something she calls developmental arrest, and this pervasive sensation of feeling behind others.
Oh, this is huge. Trauma essentially freezes you in time. If you experience severe neglect or a significant trauma at age 7 or maybe 12, a part of your emotional development gets stuck right there. So you might be a 35-year-old successful professional on the outside, but in a romantic or sexual context, you feel like a child playing dress-up in adult clothes.
It's imposter syndrome, but specifically for relationships and intimacy.
Exactly. You feel like everyone else was handed a secret manual for sex and relationships, and your copy got lost in the mail. You feel like a fraud. So when you find yourself in these very adult situations, you dissociate because you don't feel equipped. You don't feel grown up enough to handle the emotional weight of them.
And Tana Sugarin points out that the seed for this is often planted way back in infancy with mistrust.
Right. We're talking about deep pre-verbal conditioning here. This is attachment theory at its core. If, as an infant, your cries for help weren't answered or your needs were met inconsistently, sometimes mom is there and she's warm, other times she ignores you for hours, your body learns a fundamental lesson about the world.
And that lesson is?
The world is not reliable. People do not come when I call.
And that lesson doesn't just magically vanish when you turn 18.
No. It generalizes. It becomes the lens through which you see everyone. Yeah. So as an adult, even if your partner is the kindest, most reliable person on the planet, your body still remembers the neglect. You misread their motives.
You think, why are they being so nice to me? What do they want?
Exactly. You interpret basic kindness as a form of manipulation because in your history, people only gave to get.
It's like your own body is constantly gaslighting you. It's telling you that safety is actually danger.
Or, from your body's perspective, it's just trying to protect you from being fooled again. It's screaming, don't get used to this warm milk because at any moment it's going to be taken away.
Okay, so we have this internal state of chaos, this deep mistrust, this feeling of being an emotional imposter. What happens when this person actually gets into a relationship? What kind of partner do they typically attract? Because it doesn't seem to be random.
It is absolutely not random. And this is where we get to the concept of the dysfunctional puzzle piece.
This term, I love this term. It came from a Reddit user named Elementary Vision. And I just thought it was such a brilliant, if painful, metaphor for this dynamic.
It really is. The user describes a dynamic where a neglected person, someone who is used to asking for very little, someone who prides themselves on being low maintenance, pairs up almost perfectly with a narcissistic or very needy person, someone who takes a lot.
It's the perfect storm.
It is a lock and a key. The neglected partner gives and gives validation, because that is their only known model of love. I give, you take. I disappear so that you can shine. That feels normal, even comfortable to them.
And the toxic partner, of course, loves this arrangement.
They think they've hit the jackpot. They think, wow, this person is so easygoing. They never complain. They always put me first. They consume that validation like a starving person.
But the user, Elementary Vision, said something so profound about why this dynamic eventually breaks. They said, the well doesn't go as deep as they thought.
That is the moment of reckoning. The neglected partner can sustain this self-abandonment for months, maybe even years, but eventually the well runs dry. Or, what's more likely, the neglected partner tries to set one tiny, insignificant boundary.
They might say, hey, can we maybe do what I want to do tonight?
And the puzzle breaks.
It explodes.
It does. Because the dysfunctional puzzle piece only fits together if one person remains completely self-sacrificing. The moment the neglected partner says, I have needs too, the toxic partner recoils. They view that boundary as a personal attack, as an act of aggression, and the whole relationship collapses.
Tanner Sjogren frames this same dynamic as a constant battle between two opposing forces, fear of abandonment and pushing away. And this really feels like that push-pull, that come-here-go-away dance we talked about right at the beginning.
It is the central conflict of what's known as the disorganized attachment style. On one hand, you have our pattern number 9, fear of abandonment. This is what drives you to control, to possess, to cling desperately to a partner because you are terrified of being left alone again. It's the inner child clinging to the parent's leg.
The core message is, please don't leave me.
But then at the very same time, you have pattern number 10, pushing away. This is the avoidant side kicking in. As soon as that partner gets too close, as soon as things feel too intimate, the alarm bells start ringing. So you push them away to preemptively avoid the pain of vulnerability.
Get away from me before you hurt me.
So you're clutching them with one hand and shoving them away with the other. Come here. No, go away. Wait, why did you leave? Come back. Oh my God, you're smothering me. It creates this impossibly chaotic, confusing dynamic that, ironically, often leads to the very abandonment the person is trying to prevent. The partner eventually just gives up because they can't win.
And it seems like boundaries are always the first casualty in this internal war.
They are. That's pattern number 6. If you grew up in an environment with no boundaries, where your privacy was constantly invaded, or your no didn't matter, or you were made responsible for your parents' big emotions, you become an adult with porous boundaries. You feel intensely guilty just saying the word no. You feel like setting a simple limit is an act of aggression.
So you let people walk all over you until you can't take it anymore, and then you explode.
Exactly. Or you attract partners who like that you have no boundaries. Which brings us right back to that dysfunctional puzzle piece.
Okay, this is a lot. And if you're listening to this and you're just nodding your head to everything, it might feel a little overwhelming, a little hopeless even.
Wow.
Like, great, my brain is wired for disaster, my instincts are broken, and I'm destined to date narcissists for the rest of my life. Thanks for the pep talk. But the point of this deep dive isn't just to diagnose the problem, it's to talk about the blueprint for fixing it.
And there is a blueprint for healing. Both Katie Gillis and the Reddit community are very, very clear on this. It is not a life sentence. Neuroplasticity is real. The brain can change, but it is work.
So where does that work start? Gillis says the first step is actually pretty simple, but it's incredibly hard. It's acknowledgement.
We cannot change what we do not acknowledge. You have to stop calling it bad luck. You have to stop saying, I just get bored easily. You have to name the pattern. You have to be able to admit, even just to yourself, okay, I am reacting to my past, not just my present.
And once you acknowledge it, what do? Because you can't just, wish the pattern away. Your nervous system is still firing off those old signals.
This is where you have to cultivate what I like to call the pause. This is so crucial. It's about creating a tiny space, a fleeting moment between the trigger and your reaction.
Okay, walk me through that. Let's say I'm in the kitchen. My partner says something that, for whatever reason, just annoys me. My chest gets tight. My jaw clenches. What do I do in that moment?
You stop. You physically stop what you're doing.
Mm.
You don't speak. You take a breath. And you ask yourself a very specific set of questions. Am I reacting to my partner right now? Or am I reacting to my inner critic? Am I reacting to the words that were just said? Or am I reacting to a tone of voice that sounds exactly like my mother's?
You're basically fact-checking your own emotional response.
You are engaging your prefrontal cortex, your logical brain, to override the amygdala, the lizard brain that's screaming threat. You are consciously separating the past from the present. You can say to yourself, okay, I feel attacked right now. Is he actually attacking me? No, he just asked where the car keys are.
Now, obviously, therapy is a huge tool for this kind of work, but the Reddit thread had some really interesting nuance on what kind of therapy actually helps. Because for some of them, just talking about it for years didn't work.
This is very common frustration, and it was a major theme in the thread. Multiple users mentioned that standard talk therapy, like cognitive behavioral therapy or CBT, sometimes felt like stagnation. They could talk about their problems for years, they could understand them logically, but they didn't feel any different. The patterns didn't change.
One user mentioned they had decades of functional asexuality and felt totally stuck until they switched their approach.
Specifically, they mentioned moving to trauma-informed therapy, and even more specifically to things like EMDR. That's eye movement desensitization and reprocessing.
Can we just explain EMDR briefly? Because on the surface, it sounds a little sci-fi, right? Moving your eyes back and forth to heal trauma.
It does sound strange, I'll give you that. But the logic behind it is very sound. Trauma doesn't just live in your conscious thoughts, it lives in your body. It lives in your nervous system. When you experience a trauma, the memory gets stuck with all the original sensory data. The sights, sounds, smells, and physical feelings. You can't just talk your nervous system out of a fight or flight response.
So what does EMDR do?
It uses bilateral stimulation like the eye movements or tapping on your hands to help the brain properly process that stuck memory. It helps move it from the current threat part of your brain into long-term storage where it belongs. It basically takes the emotional charge out of the memory.
So instead of reliving the car crash in full color every time you think about it, it just becomes a memory of a car crash, a thing that happened in the past.
Exactly. It stops being a current active threat. And that is what allows you to actually be present in your current relationship instead of constantly reacting to ghosts.
The other big practical tool that came up was boundaries. But as we already discussed, for this group of people, setting a boundary can feel like holding a live grenade.
It feels mean. If you were trained to be a people pleaser to survive, saying no feels like you were committing an act of aggression against the other person.
Mm-hmm.
But Katie Gillis emphasizes that this is a muscle you have to build over time. You have to start small.
So don't start with, I'm moving out and we're breaking up. Start with, actually, I can't talk on the phone right now.
Exactly. You set one small, manageable limit. Something like, I need 20 minutes to just decompress by myself when I get home from work before we talk about our day. And then, and this is the hardest part, you have to survive the wave of guilt that follows.
Because the guilt will come?
The guilt will absolutely come. It will scream at you that you are selfish, that you are a bad partner, but you just sit with the guilt, you don't act on it, and you realize the world didn't end. Your partner is still there.
And you get to watch how the other person reacts to that boundary.
That is the ultimate litmus test. If you set a reasonable boundary and the other person flips out or blames you or calls you selfish, well, that is data. A healthy partner will say, okay, I get it, I can do that. A toxic partner will view your newfound independence as a threat to their control.
So the boundary doesn't just protect you, it reveals who you're actually with.
Precisely.
I want to end this how-to section with an analogy from a Reddit user, Miserable Bastard 1995. I think it just captures the reality of this healing process better than any clinical textbook possibly could. It's not a straight line. It's a mess.
The car analogy. This was so profound.
It really was. He talks about how healing from this stuff is like working on a broken down car in a dark garage. He says it takes a long time to get the car on the road, and it is exhausting.
And he describes watching all the other people just driving by on the street. They're zooming past in their functional cars, their secure attachments, laughing, having fun, going places. And he's stuck in the garage, covered in grease, wrenching on this rusty engine, swearing, busting his knuckles.
It feels so unfair. He says, I'm so intimate with the parts of my engine, but I'm tired. I just want to drive.
It captures the frustration perfectly. Why do I have to work this hard just to function like a normal human being? Why did everyone else seem to get a working car off the lot, and I got this lemon I have to rebuild from scratch?
But, and this is the hopeful part of it, he is getting it on the road. He writes about his journey moving from an anxious attachment style to a secure one. It took a long time, and it was greasy, hard, painful work, but the car runs now.
That is the hope. You can rewire the engine. You can change the setting on the thermostat. You can redraw the invisible blueprint. Your childhood may have drawn the first draft, but you are the architect now. You get to draw the renovation plans.
So let's bring this all home. What does this all mean for us? Whether you've been through severe trauma or you're just trying to understand why your dating life feels like a merry-go-round of disappointment,
I think it means we need to have a lot more compassion for our own confusion. We need to stop judging ourselves for our instincts. If you find yourself bored in a healthy relationship, don't just immediately break up. Get curious. Investigate the boredom. Ask yourself, is this boredom or is this just peace?
And if you find yourself magnetically drawn to chaos, don't just dive in head first. Investigate the magnetism. Ask, is this real passion? Or is this just familiarity in disguise?
It's about becoming a curious observer of your own life, stepping out of the river for a moment and just watching the current.
And for those of you listening who might be the partner of someone with this kind of background, I really hope this gives you a map.
It should help you understand the why behind what can feel like baffling behavior, why they sometimes push you away right after you get close, why they might pick a fight right after you make them a really nice dinner. It's almost never about you. It's about a nervous system that is trying to find safety in the only way it knows how.
I think that's the biggest takeaway for me, too. It's not about you, it's about a blueprint that they are actively and painfully trying to rewrite.
And our job, either as partners or as the person doing the work on ourselves, is to teach the body a new definition of safety. To teach it that safety doesn't have to be boring, that peace can be a place where we rest, not just a place where we wait for the next explosion.
I want to leave everyone with a final thought today, something that's been bouncing around my head since we started this research. We talked a lot about how safe relationships can feel boring, and we usually treat boredom as a signal to leave. We say the spark just isn't there, but I want to challenge that idea.
Go on.
If you find yourself feeling bored in a relationship, ask yourself, is it actually boring, or is it just quiet? Is it just safe? And if it is safe, are you brave enough to just sit in that quiet? Are you brave enough to sit there, ignoring that frantic urge to run, ignoring the urge to start a fight, ignoring the ick, until that silence stops feeling like a threat and starts, finally, feeling like home?
That is the ultimate challenge, isn't it? To endure the peace long enough to learn how to enjoy it.
Thanks for diving deep with us today.
Take care of yourselves out there.
We'll see you next time.